The following is a presentation of New Worker Radio. The views and opinions expressed therein do not necessarily represent those of WZML, its staff, or management.
Hello, and welcome to New Worker News on WZML 92.9. My name is Manolis, bringing you national and international updates from a worker's perspective. To begin, here is Yanis with the local news.
Thank you, Manolis. On May 29th, while giving a speech at Yeshiva University's commencement, Representative John Fetterman removed his Harvard hood in protest of the pro-Palestinian student demonstrations. During his speech, Fetterman framed it as an issue of Harvard failing to address anti-Semitism, ironically engaging in the anti-Semitic and dangerous rhetoric that attempts to equate Zionism with Judaism or Jewishness. The encampments around the country, including the one at Harvard, far from being anti-Semitic, saw the active participation of many Jewish students, faculty, and community members, all who stood up to protest the genocide in Gaza. In truth, what Fetterman was truly upset about was that the university did not repress the student demonstrations savagely enough. The senator's rabid support for Israel is not surprising when we consider his 2022 campaign for Senate. This race saw a bitter and close fight between Fetterman and his opponent, Dr. Mehmet Oz. It also saw a substantial amount of money being thrown around by the pro-Israeli lobby. Both campaigns received hundreds of thousands of dollars from pro-Israeli groups. For Fetterman, one of the major groups financing his campaign was the Political Action Committee Democratic Majority for Israel. Another being J Street PAC, which contributed over $200,000 to the campaign. The close ties between pro-Israel groups and Fetterman go beyond donations. Mark Mellman, the head of Democratic Majority for Israel, has openly admitted to helping write Fetterman's position paper on Israel. Of course, this phenomenon is not restricted to only Democratic Party candidates. During the same race, Oz received substantial assistance from the Republican Jewish Coalition. The amount of funding that the pro-Israeli lobby provided to both candidates cannot be understated. For example, Democratic Majority, during the election, funded and carried out a six-figure mail program which attacked Oz and urged people to vote for Fetterman. Similarly, the Republican Jewish Coalition ran an attack ad campaign against Fetterman that totaled $1.5 million. Much like Fetterman, Oz has given nothing but his full-throated support for Israel's attack on Gaza. And it is not hard to see why. During this race, both candidates reported raising millions of dollars, some of which was raised in as little as 3 months. For example, in the third quarter of 2022, Fetterman raised over $22 million. In the same 3-month span, Oz raised over $17.2 million. This kind of money does not come from the working class, who are themselves struggling to make ends meet. No, the vast majority of it comes from the monopolies, from the capitalist class. And of course, this money is not given freely. It is to ensure that the candidates promote the interest of capital. At bottom, both Oz and Fetterman are beholden to the interest of capital. They do not and never will support our interests as workers. The fact is that whether Republican or Democrat, both of these candidates represent the interests of the monopolies, of the capitalist class which exploits us daily. The working class needs a party which is completely politically independent, one which will fight for our interests, never wavering from its duty to the working class. This party can only be the Communist Party, but with the ideological, political degeneration of the historical Communist Party in our country, we find ourselves without a real party of the working class. However, our task remains the same. If there is no Communist Party, then it is our duty to build it. The Communist Workers' Platform USA is aiming to do just that. We have picked up the red banner and are once again waving it high as we march forward towards the construction of a real working class alternative, the Communist Party. Our future and the future of the working class lies with the Communist Workers' Platform. Now for our next story. On May 30th, nurses and tech professionals at Fox Chase ratified their first union contract. This comes a year after nurses and techs won their union vote in 2 separate elections. PASNAP, the workers' union, reported that the contract was approved with 97% of votes being in favor, but have yet to release information on voter turnout. The workers at Fox Chase have taken a clear progressive step forward in obtaining this first contract. The progressive character of this cannot be debated, but is this a good contract? Did the union militantly fight for the workers' best interest to win the best contract that it could win? Unfortunately, the full contract has not been made public as far as New Worker is aware, but PASNAP did issue a press release which highlighted some features of the contract. In it, they claim that the contract provides, quote, real commitment to staffing in the hospital through the establishment of 2 joint practice committees between nurses and techs and the employer. The idea is that these committees will meet every other month to discuss, quote, any ongoing concerns, but there is no mention of any binding language in the contract that will force Fox Chase to actually address the issue. This kind of concession is based on a class collaborationist worldview, which imagines that workplace disagreements between the bosses and workers are reconcilable through social dialogue. This is a grave mistake. The fact is that our interests as workers are diametrically opposed to and irreconcilable with the interests of the bosses. What is good for the bosses is necessarily bad for workers, and vice versa. In class struggle, there is no such thing as a win-win. Further, dialogue will not and cannot ever win us the real gains that we deserve. Only militant struggle, often through the use of the strike weapon, can force real concessions from the bosses. The contract does require the hospital to, quote, post the current staffing guidelines, either electronically or physically, on a unit and make efforts to fill a hole in a posted schedule. With no mention of what efforts means exactly, it is unclear how this meaningfully addresses the understaffing at Fox Chase. For one of the top grievances of the workers to go unaddressed like this is unacceptable. The statement continues in claiming that the contract provides, quote, new wage scale with healthy wage increases. While the pay scale is not detailed, the wage increases were. For the first year of the 3-year contract, workers can expect a 3.25% raise with 3% wage increases for the remaining 2 years. While the pay scale is not detailed in the release, these wage increases are anything but healthy. In 2023, the average inflation rate was 4.1%. The current rate is 3.5%, meaning that these wage increases will be completely eaten away by inflation. Any wage increase that barely tracks inflation cannot be considered an actual increase because the nominal increase is offset by the decrease caused by inflation. Far from increasing, your wages stagnate. In 2022, Greece saw an inflation rate of over 11%. In this same year, after years of militant struggles, strikes, and other actions, the National Federation of Construction Workers of Greece, a member of the militant PAME, were able to secure wage increases of between 18% to 38.4%. The workers at Fox Chase deserve real wage increases that reflect their hard work and sacrifice, especially during the COVID pandemic. No union leadership, which had the workers' best interests at heart, would have endorsed a contract with such disgustingly low wage increases. Another feature highlighted was the so-called ratification bonus, which provides a one-time bonus to both full-time and part-time employees explicitly for ratifying the contract. Full-time workers will receive $1,250 less applicable holdings, while part-timers will receive $625, again, less applicable holdings. Given all of the above, this cannot be seen as anything but a blatant bribe of the workers to get them to accept a concessionary, sorry contract that favors the bosses. Why would the employer throw in a deal sweetener for a contract which was extracting heavy concessions from them? They wouldn't, unless they wanted to lock in a favorable contract quickly. As with failures, so too with successes. We must take a sober assessment and engage in the necessary criticism and self-criticism to improve our work. When we engage in such criticism, far from endangering the movement, we are strengthening it. When we point out our mistakes, when we put forward the ways in which our work could have been improved, we ensure that the movement is steeled and ready for the inevitable next confrontation. To the workers at Fox Chase, you've taken the first important step in struggling for a better life in organizing yourselves. But the fight is far from done. If you are to secure real gains in your contracts, you will need to organize militantly. A contract gained through a protracted strike will be many times better than one offered to avert one. Remember, it is your union. Fight for it.
We'll be right back with more of New Worker News here on 92.9 FM WZML. But I want to remind you that every day throughout this country, workers are subjected to injustices and humiliation at the hands of the capitalists, from unpaid wages to mass layoffs. So we at New Worker understand the tyranny that the workplace is for workers. This is why we fight to expose these injustices. Only through militant organization of the working class can we stand toe-to-toe against the bosses. So this is why we want to hear from you, the listener. Are you having issues at work? Bosses cutting your hours or wages? Are you or your fellow workers' safety being thrown out of the window in the name of ever-increasing profit? Well, you are not alone. So reach out to us to tell your story. You can anonymously send an email or even a voice memo to cwpusa@protonmail.com. Again, that is cwpusa@protonmail.com. And check us out online at newworker.us. And now back to New Worker Radio, only here on 92.9 FM WZML.
We want to start today by expressing the meaning of the working class, who we are. This is important to understand since New Worker and New Worker Radio are the voice of the workers, the voice of the party of the working class, that is, the voice of the communists. It is important to point out some characteristics to avoid confusion that capitalism wants to perpetuate. Workers are all those who do not have means of production to obtain profits. In this society, the only thing that belongs to us is our labor power. We are the employed and the unemployed, those of formal and informal work, farmers, students, and housewives. We are all those who have to work to live, or rather, to half live. Those of us who live from day to day, seeing how to stretch our pay across each week or each month. We are those in the educational sector, the healthcare sector, those who work in factories, day laborers, or miners. That is the working class. The capitalist system tries to divide us into the middle, upper, or lower class and makes us believe that we are privileged to have a safe job with a salary higher than the minimum and retirement for working in the health or educational sectors. We can see that we are all exploited with wage insecurity and job instability. The new generations do not even have a stable job, and the employers who do not comply with the minimum legal requirements, since they do not give them benefits or pay them as they should for the extra hours they work. Many times, students, if they finish their education, cannot work in what they like and for which they were trained for. They can no longer acquire a home, nor become independent from their parents, and it is only a dream to think that they will have a retirement. The working class is all of us who depend on our labor power. Enough of believing that by having a little more, or if we make a little more effort and pursue postgraduate studies, we will progress, that we will fulfill all of our dreams. That is what the defenders of the current system of exploitation want us to believe. They keep us competing individually so as not to confront them as a class, the exploiters. Enough of enriching these parasites, the businessmen, the bourgeoisie, the monopolies. The working class is the majority. We are the ones who do work, and despite that, we do not see the results that are fair and proportional to our effort. Let's change this oppressive system. Let's make this country a country for the working class, where power belongs to the workers and for the workers. For our national and international news stories today, the United States is persisting with its so-called mediation efforts in the Middle East, adhering to its three-phase proposal unveiled on May 31st by President Joe Biden, which is laden with what he calls creative ambiguity. This proposal seeks a truce in Gaza and a prisoner exchange after 8 months of brutal carnage in the Gaza Strip
inflicted by the murderous Israeli state, with its vibrant backers and the military support of the US and other Euro-Atlantic allies. In this context, pushing forward US plans for the next day, new contracts are being made in Doha and Cairo by CIA Director G. Burns and the White House's Special Envoy for the Middle East and North Africa, Brett McGurk. Meanwhile, on Monday, June 10th, Secretary of State Antony Blinken is expected to visit Israel once again, marking his 8th trip since last October. The U.S. proposal is intensifying internal conflicts and discussions within the Israeli government, which currently refuses to agree, citing gaps, omissions, inaccuracies, and more. Simultaneously, the U.S. is attempting to portray the Israeli government as willing to accept the proposal while depicting Hamas as inflexible in the negotiations, thereby shifting the blame for any potential failure onto Hamas. Hamas officials acknowledge positive elements in the Biden proposal, such as provisions for a permanent ceasefire, the withdrawal of Israeli forces from the Gaza Strip, the reconstruction of Gaza, and a prisoner exchange. However, they state that they have not received any official document, and they emphasize key conditions: the withdrawal of Israeli troops, the free movement of citizens between northern and southern Gaza, a significant increase in humanitarian aid, and the provision of equipment to clear the mountains of rubble from Israeli bombings. On the morning of June 7th, a spokesman for Qatar's foreign ministry announced that Hamas had not formally responded to the mediator's latest proposal for a truce and prisoner swap, and was still studying it, while mediation efforts by Qatar, Egypt, and the USA continued. A day earlier, the US and 16 other countries, most of them US allies with citizens among the hostages held in Gaza, signed a joint statement supporting the ceasefire and prisoner exchange proposal outlined by Biden on May 31st. The announcement, signed by the leaders of the USA, Argentina, Austria, Brazil, Bulgaria, Canada, Colombia, Denmark, France, Germany, Poland, Portugal, Romania, Serbia, Spain, Thailand, and Britain, calls on Israel and Hamas to make whatever final compromises are necessary to close this deal. In addition, the U.S. appears to be pressuring countries with what they determine as Hamas influence. These countries are Qatar, Turkey, and Egypt, in order to extort a deal with threats of measures of various kinds. Qatari officials reportedly, under pressure from Washington, threatened Palestinian Liberation Organization leaders with expulsion from the Emirates if they rejected this diplomatic effort as well. The USA continues its whitewashing of the massacre at the expense of the Palestinian people in the Gaza Strip, as well as the military support of the murderous Israeli state. The total number of dead since October 7th exceeds 37,124, and the wounded 84,712. Characteristically, in an interview with news network ABC, Biden said that the Israeli Prime Minister listens to me, citing as an example that the Israeli forces would go to Rafah in full force, invade all of Rafah, enter the city, and they didn't do that. In fact, the US president is whitewashing Israel for the ground attack it has launched against Rafah since the beginning of May, which, in addition to many dead and wounded, and in addition to massacres like the one in the Tal al-Sultan civilian camp, also caused the new displacement of more than 1 million Palestinians who have nowhere to go in the flattened Gaza. At the same time, in the midst of the massacre of the Palestinian people, the U.S. proceeded with another equipment package of 25 new generation F-35 fighter jets. The cost is estimated to exceed $3 billion, an amount paid for entirely by U.S. military aid. Chiquita Brands was ordered Monday by a Florida jury to pay $38.3 million to the families of 8 people killed by a paramilitary group in Colombia, which the banana grower had funded for years during that country's violent civil war. Chiquita representatives continue to try to fight the claims. Chiquita had previously acknowledged funding the paramilitary group, pleading guilty in 2007 after the U.S. Department of Justice charged the company with providing payments to the group known as the Autodefensas Unidas de Colombia, or AUC. They received payments from Chiquita from about 1997 through 2004, which the company had described as so-called security payments during the country's internal conflict. The decision marks the first time a jury has held a monopoly liable for a major human rights violation in another country, according to Earth Rights International, a human rights firm that represented one family in the case. Chiquita still faces thousands of other claims from the victims of the AUC, and Monday's decision could pave the way for more cases to come to trial, or for a global settlement, said Marco Simmons, Earth Rights General Counsel, in a press conference to discuss the jury's decision. This case demonstrates the use of paramilitarism by the monopolies to maintain their power. When we talk about paramilitarism, we are referring to all those organizations or armed groups that have a structure similar to that of an army. The paramilitary groups are made up of police, soldiers, and mercenaries who make up commands and squads, mostly of irregular troops that are not governed by any law or convention of bourgeois democracy. This allows them methods and the use of extreme violence to achieve their goals. Some of the best known and documented methods are kidnappings, torture, rape, extrajudicial murders, and forced disappearances, all of which are considered crimes against humanity. In the case of AUC, they are a state-sanctioned paramilitary created between 1996 and 1997 from the military, the right-wing forces, and drug traffickers in order to combat the Colombian insurgency. The bourgeois state, its political, legal, and social institutions, deny the existence of paramilitarism and its relationship as another armed wing of the bourgeoisie, as well as its connection to drug trafficking. While serving to protect the pockets of the monopolies, another primary aim of paramilitary groups are their political objectives. They target all manifestations of popular discontent, whether it is the communists, unions, students, or mobilizations for social and economic demands. This is so that the revolutionary forces can be separated from political influencing of the working, peasant, and popular masses. The bourgeoisie, as the ruling class, regardless of legality, has to create private military bodies for its security and maintaining its social order. In the case of Chiquita, the paramilitary group AUC was used to clamp down on all manifestations from union and labor leaders. June marks Pride Month, a month where capitalism opens its shops with rainbow decorations in order to whiten capitalism and present it as a progressive force for the various social groups it seeks to integrate into its consensus. However, this consensus ruptures in the face of the ceaseless cycles of crisis within capitalism, leading the ruling class to ever more depraved and deceitful tactics to maintain their grip on power and keep the working class weak and disunited. The cost of living has increased dramatically. Essential goods and services have exploded in price, all while pay is stagnant and working conditions have not improved. Popular dissatisfaction grows, and the various competing sections within the U.S. bourgeoisie and their henchmen in the state aim to exploit the fear and anxiety experienced by the working class in this growing crisis. This is all in an attempt to divert the workers' attention away from the economic nature of the struggle. This has taken the form of reactionary and discriminatory policies advanced in Louisiana, Ohio, Arizona, Florida, Texas, Tennessee, just to name a few. These policies reflect the consensus of conservative and religious electorates in order to manage the ever-growing socioeconomic problems. However, the analysis cannot stop here. The religious element is a crucial element in the construction of the institutions of the capitalist state. Religious obscurantism, behind these divisive policies, has paired itself with anti-communism, serving as an instrument in dividing the workers. Discrimination against immigrants, women, and the LGBTQ community goes hand in hand with the demonization of the struggle for socialism and communism, which is inspired by the principles of equality. In this way, the fragmentation of the working class, with important sections of it embracing the anti-LGBTQ propaganda, is at the same time a measure for a united capitalism. At the helm of the reactionary and conservative values, we find the likes of Governor Ron DeSantis and other Republican leaders. However, we can't be fooled into believing that the Democrats, who try to cover capitalism with a rainbow, can change the balance of power within society between the exploiter and the exploited. Social rights are not satisfied by grand words about equality or by invoking the alleged freedom of individual choice. They are claimed and conquered by participating in the social class struggles against those who try to slaughter our rights because our position in society, nourished by the deprivation of many, is with the majority of those who work as wage earners. The issue, therefore, cannot be the replacement of social rights with individual choice. The political satisfaction of social rights can only be achieved in the collective struggle for the overthrow of the rotten, exploitative system based on contemporary social needs. Participation in the struggle is a social action, an element for the development of the personality of each and everyone, and the cultivation of the abilities and the inclination that each person has. On the contrary, when individualism or distorted concepts of individual identity dominate popular consciousness and action of the new generations, everyone is then isolated in the face of a system that breeds social inequalities and discrimination. The confrontation between the Democrats and the Republicans over the struggles of the LGBTQ movement are merely the tactics of the bourgeoisie to hegemonize and exploit these struggles for their own gain. The values promoted by these capitalist parties are those which were promoted in the times of 1981 to 1991, the counter-revolution in the USSR and the subsequent fall of socialism. It is from this viewpoint that the attacks on the rights of LGBTQ people and the recent attacks on the rights of women, in the case of abortion bans, create conflicts that need not and should not exist within the working class while attacking social rights in favor of the profits of capital. They further justify the criminalization of the conquest of the communist and workers' movement. A true project for the radical transformation of society must take civil demands and make them march alongside social demands, always keeping in mind who the enemy is on the path towards the definitive overthrow of the system and the elimination of exploitation and social discrimination once and for all.
You've been listening to New Worker News on 92.9 FM WZML, your home for local, national, and international news, all from a working class perspective. New Worker News is the official organ of the Communist Workers Platform. If you're a worker, we would like to hear from you. You can reach us at cwpusa@protonmail.com. Again, that's cwpusa@protonmail.com. If you would like more news from a worker's point of view, visit us at newworker.us. You can find weekly articles on events happening all over the country and internationally. If you've enjoyed the program and wish to see more working class reporting, consider donating to our Patreon at patreon.com/New Worker. And thank you for listening to New Worker News on 92.9 FM WZML.